So I am not going to be long today. I do have something that I would like to share from Mark 16. This is our last chapter of Mark. I'm not sure where the Lord is going to lead me after this, but I know that He did want me to complete the book of Mark in the month of January. And so, yay, we made it. This is the last chapter. And it was extremely short. So the other day we talked about your persecution, right? And how your persecution was not an indication of sin, but it was an indication of your righteousness. And the perspective was that when Jesus was brought before Pilate, Jesus was put in the same category as a murderer, and they were accusing him of things that he did not do, but according to them, he did do, right? He was a blasphemer. He was doing witchcraft. He had, authority that he didn't have. He was saying he was the son of God, and they were like, how can that be? So they really just had so many accusations against Jesus. And when they ended up letting the murderer go and they started the crucifixion process for Jesus, Jesus was not up there on his own. He was also up there with people who were actually guilty of the sin that they were up there for. And so, I really talked about how when you're following God, you're going to receive persecution that is unjust, that is unrighteous, right? Because people don't really understand the decisions that you're making. They don't understand how you're thinking. They don't understand your walk. They don't understand what you're talking. They don't understand at all. And so they will persecute you just off the basis of you sound crazy. And really deep down inside, it's just a jealousy. It's just, some of them, not all, some of them know that they should be following Christ. Some of them know that God has called them to do certain things and they just didn't do it. And so here you come, the one that decided to listen to God and step out on faith and do the things that He has called you to do. And now all of a sudden, all of hell is breaking loose against you, and He's using the people that are closest to you. And sometimes it can feel like you're doing something wrong when actually you're doing all of the right things. It's just the way people are seeing things. They're seeing it from their own perception. They are seeing it from a carnal mind instead of a spiritual mind. And again, that's what the Pharisees was doing when it came to Jesus. They were not seeing Jesus for who He really was. It didn't matter how many demons He cast out. It didn't matter how many people He healed. It didn't matter, Him resurrecting Lazarus and the dead girl. Like, it didn't matter what He did. They questioned Him at every turn. And unfortunately, that's going to be some of our stories where that's going to happen. And you have to learn to love people with grace and to give them grace for their lack of understanding. So as we get into Mark 16 literally is just talking about the resurrection. And it was extremely short. But one of the things that I noticed that I was paying attention to is that at the death of Jesus, there were the death, the burial, and the resurrection, right? A lot of people were around for different parts of Jesus dying and being buried, and His resurrection. But I noticed that there was one person in particular that they kept mentioning that she was there, and her name was Mary Magdalene. Now, there is a lot of controversy, maybe or maybe not, regarding what her role was. Who was she? Some people said that she was a prostitute. Some people said that she was the woman that poured out the perfume on Jesus' head. Some people said that she was the woman that the men brought before Jesus to try to accuse her of adultery, because I think it just says the woman, right? For all of those situations, the woman, a woman. So people just associated Mary Magdalene with that woman, but there's no real evidence to say that she was in any of those scenarios. And even when it did mention her, it did mention that she was someone that God delivered 7 demons from. And that's really about it. You know, you hear of her here and there in the Bible, but that's really it. You don't hear too much. But I did notice in Mark 15 that she was at the death of Jesus. And it said, some women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger, and of, I don't know how you say that name, Hoses, and Salome. Then in the burial of Jesus, it says Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph saw where he was laid. And then in the resurrection, it said, and this is Mark 16, it says, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. So they went to anoint Jesus' body, and they were discussing as they were walking who was going to roll back the stone. But lo and behold, when they got to the burial site, they found that the stone was already rolled back. And it was an angel who had already, rolled the stone back. Jesus was already resurrected, and he instructed them not to be afraid, but that Jesus would go before them and they would see him in Galilee. But what I thought was special was in verse 9, it says, when Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. So I thought that was special, because I would think that he would go and appear to his disciples first, right? The ones that he spent the most time with. But also what stood out to me was the next sentence where it says, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. So as I was sitting here reading this, I was thinking to myself, well, why was it important to mention that Mary Magdalene was the one that he had delivered from 7 demons? And so I just have an encouraging word to say that you belong. You belong. When we think about Mary Magdalene, again, there's so much controversy around who she was. But as you can see, that she was a follower of Christ. When you look down a few sentences down, a few paragraphs down, you'll see that Jesus does also make his way to his disciples. But one of the things that he says with his disciples is, later Jesus appeared, and this is in verse 14. Later Jesus appeared to the 11 as they were eating. He rebuked them for their lack of faith and their stubborn refusal to believe those who had seen him after he had risen. So that stood out to me, because even the disciples refused to believe that Jesus was resurrected. Now, this was quite peculiar to me, because again, these disciples lived with him, walked with him, talked with him, prayed with him, were the most intimate out of anybody, and yet and still they didn't even believe when word had gotten out that Jesus was alive. And it just makes me think that sometimes we think that the most qualified ones are the ones that have, all of the rank, or position in church, or, that have been in ministry for a long time, or, have, the vernacular, they know all of the scripture, all of these things. And again, that doesn't make them not who they say that they are. But I didn't see where the disciples had been delivered from any demons, or, he had to cast some out of them, or, they were, he raised them from the dead, or what have you. The disciples, a lot of what you see with them is that Jesus is talking to them about their faith and wanting them to really understand his position and what he was about to go through. But as I began to see this, it made me think that sometimes we will disqualify ourselves from the things that we have to go through, to think that, well, this person didn't have to go through as much as me. Maybe I sinned more. Maybe something was more wrong with me, or maybe, it's working out for them, but not me because of this and that. And I want to give a personal story. And it kind of relates to this. So and it's about faith. So God had put something big in my heart about what he was going to do for me. I didn't know when, I didn't know how I didn't know the magnitude of it, but it was extremely big in my heart. That's the only way that I can describe it. And so, and this was early days of learning about who God was and who I was in him and what he was going to have me doing. And I had absolutely no idea about getting to this point where I am now. And so I saw somebody who was in ministry, and I watched this person, and they were killing it according to me. I mean, they were at the conferences, they were, being called upon, they were on the stages, they were, popular on social media. God was doing all these wonderful things for them. And they had gotten, I think I mentioned this before, they had gotten a home. And I was extremely happy for them, right? At one point I thought maybe God was calling us to move to Texas, right? Because I just kept seeing Texas, Texas, Texas everywhere. So I was always looking at the homes in Texas, and the homes were extremely beautiful in Texas, and they were very good prices. And I felt like, yes, if we was going to move anywhere, it was going to be Texas. I did not know we was going to have to move to Ohio. So this person had gotten a brand new home, and they were like talking about it, kind of showing their home. And I was very excited for them. And I had this thought very quickly, because what I felt like God had placed in my spirit was like off the chain. It was bigger than anything that I've ever seen before. So I felt like, who am I to think this big? Who am I to have this desire in my heart? Did I put this desire in my heart? Am I being gaudy or prideful or what have you, because I had this huge desire for a home that I'm thinking like, what would make me better than her? Now, it wasn't me better than her in terms of calling, but I was just thinking like, but Lord, she's out here killing it, right? I don't want to talk. I don't want to do no videos. I don't want to build no business. I don't want to do any of these things, right? So I'm like, well, but what you have put in me is just huge. That's the only way that I could describe it. And so I remember asking my husband, was I doing too much? Like, was what I had in my heart, was it too much? And my husband let me know that it wasn't. And to this day, I really couldn't describe what it was that I felt. And I was disqualifying myself because I felt like I wasn't as astute as she was. I wasn't in ministry, at the time. I was doing my YouTube channel, getting 2 and 3 views, every month or something like that. It was just really small. And I felt like, I feel like I'm releasing the word that God has given me. Nobody's watching the YouTube. I'm not getting much traction on social media. And so you would see me be up and down because I just felt like I was disqualifying myself. Like, maybe I'm just not doing it right. Like, maybe I just didn't know. And I said that to say that I believe that when Mary Magdalene was, when Jesus cast out those 7 demons from her, I'm sure people probably looked at Mary Magdalene like, ooh, like, you had demons cast out of you, just like how they treated the blind men, and how they treated the ones that were demon possessed, and they put them away in a tomb and locked them up, and they was like, no, these are people that we don't want in our society. but she was actually a very faithful follower of Christ. And I can see how the disciples would be the ones that everybody would be looking up to, right? Those was Jesus' right hand men. They were with him everywhere he went. They assisted him in the miracles. I mean, they were in every part of the story of Jesus. So they had their own notoriety, right, for being followers of Jesus and always being with him, and people probably wanting to question them about, how is Jesus really, and what is he like, and you get to be with him, you get to eat with him. They had this really intimate, close relationship with Jesus. And even as you see in Mark, you don't see Mary being mentioned as one of his disciples. She is mentioned as one of the followers of Christ, but she's not mentioned as a disciple. But yet and still, and you see her everywhere. You see her at the death. You see her at the burial. You see her at the resurrection. And Jesus chooses her to be the first one that he reveals himself to. To me, that was a special privilege. And so it just made me think that you belong. We belong, right? We might not always have what everybody else have, right? We might not have the popularity. We might not have the notoriety. We might not have the name yet, the stage or the platform yet. We might not have the finances and the vehicles, and we might not have all those things. But those things don't make you. Your past doesn't disqualify you. All of the things that you have been through, God is using those things to birth out something greater, something authentic, a vessel that he can use, a vessel that is not compromised, a vessel that cannot be bribed, a vessel that he can trust to go out there and bring the lost souls to him. And so I just wanted to encourage you, because most of us sometimes feel like Mary Magdalene, right? She didn't have an important role that we could see in the Bible, right? She wasn't just this. Her name is mentioned a lot, but you don't know too much about her. She does not have her own story like the 12 disciples, right? They were mentioned in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and everywhere else. They have their place. But Mary Magdalene, you see her name, but you don't see that there was too much surrounding her, right? Except for one thing you do know is that she was delivered from 7 demons. And who wants to really be known for that? And that's it. And so I just, was thinking to myself, I said, you know what, Lord? I want to encourage people to let them know that you belong. Regardless of your past, regardless of what you've been through, regardless of what you're going through, regardless of what people may say about you, regardless of how your situation looks right now, Jesus can use every single piece of who you are. Be yourself authentically. Don't try to be anyone else. Mary Magdalene was herself. She wasn't mentioned with the 12 disciples. But she was herself, and she was able to receive and actually be in a position where Jesus was able to honor her with his presence first. And then it says when he went to his disciples, he didn't greet them with hugs and kisses and all type of stuff. It says he rebuked them immediately for their lack of faith because they didn't believe when they heard word that Jesus was alive. Yet and still we see his disciples with nothing. Yes, they were tasked to go out on a great commission and bring lost souls in. But their lack of faith was evident everywhere. He was always having to speak to them about faith. And these were the people that were closest to him. But yet he showed himself to Mary Magdalene first. So be encouraged on today. Don't disqualify yourself because you don't have what everybody else has. Don't disqualify yourself because you don't look like or sound like or act like how everybody else acts or looks or sounds. God made you, you. So you don't have to be anybody else. It's taken me years to be comfortable with being myself, right? My goofy, funny, loud, but quiet, serious self in all the parts of me and how I think and how I react and, just everything. But it is beautiful once you start to really Accept who God has made you to be. And that's where you grow. That's where you bloom. That's where you blossom. When you are in your own environment and you can be who God has called you to be. So be encouraged on today. Don't get caught up in the I should be like, or I should be this place, or I should, this person, that person. God has made you to be you. You are where you need to be right now. And wherever it is that you are ascribing to be, striving to be, God will get you there in due time. All right. I love you. I will be back on here. Don't know when, so don't hold me to it. But God has given me another word or two that I do need to release. So it shall be released soon. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.